Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 2 and the last part of my Thunderhead cloud study. And in this video we're going to add the final touches to the cloud and the mountains. If you want to follow along with traditional materials, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the brushes and the paint and the canvas that I use. The app that I'm using is Infinite Painter for Android. And what I want to do is start adding some of the lighter pockets on the cloud again. And so I'm using a mixture of white acrylic gesso with a slight tint of cadmium orange. And you can also use a slight tint of cadmium red. But you don't want pure white just yet. For pure white, you're going to use for just the final highlights, and you won't use it very much. You'll just use it for the edges of the cloud. And so here I'm just adding some pockets of the white against the dark places in the cloud. And you can use your painting to see where all the pockets of the light are. Your photo reference for your painting. And you just want to go ahead and use kind of a rounded stroke here, and I'm using the Leo brush in Infinite Painter. And if you're following along traditionally, the filbert brush works pretty well for making rounded edges. And then I want to go ahead and add some darker pockets. So I'm adding a light blue in some of the dark areas, but it's still darker than the white areas that I've got there. And this is what makes your 3-dimension in the clouds, this contrast. You want the white and the blue contrast together, and you don't want to kill all the blue and you don't want to smudge out all the white. You want to keep the edges of the white showing up against a darker background of blue, and that just gives it the sort of the 3-dimensional look. And here I'm smudging in the bottom of the strokes that I've added there. So whenever you add a cloud stroke, you can leave the edge, the top edge, sort of a hard edge, but you want to soften the bottom of the strokes that you've put on there, and that will just make it look fuzzy on that part there, and that gives you that contrast. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm smudging the dark strokes at the bottom, and I'm smudging the light strokes at the bottom, but you don't want to smudge the top edges, because that gives you your shape of the cotton ball look that you have with these big Thunderhead clouds. And here I'm just kind of working on the edges of the cloud, and you can leave brush strokes that look kind of ragged and unfinished, because that's what clouds look like. They have wisps of clouds building in front of other clouds, and so you want to leave some of these brush strokes there, because the clouds are not perfectly smooth, they're not round, they're not like a ball or something. You don't want them to be a ball or a perfect sphere. You want that raggedy look, because that's what gives you the 3-dimensional look. If you blend all that out, then all you just have is a big white blob, and it just doesn't look 3-dimensional. And I've seen a lot of people have trouble with this concept. They want to get this big Thunderhead cloud look, but they're blending too much. And so you don't want to over blend in the middle of your cloud. You want to leave those edges, those pockets of dark and light there. You want the little bumps that are on top of the clouds there, and that look like little cotton balls. You want to leave all that in. You don't want to blend it all away. And you want to make sure that you have the contrast of the light colors and the dark colors. And it doesn't matter if you have different colors of blue and purples, because that also adds 3-dimensional depth to your painting. And here I'm adding the little dark wisps of cloud that float in front of the big Thunderheads, and that just gives it more of a three-dimensional look, and especially if this is sort of a dark look on the clouds. And I'm using probably an ultramarine blue mixture with Hooker's green mixed in with it and white acrylic gesso. We just want kind of a greenish blue look here, kind of a gray look. And so you want to go ahead and put those in, and you can smudge them out a little bit, but make sure that you keep that horizontal look of those clouds and the ragged edges on the darker clouds, because that just adds to the depth of your cloud and makes it look three-dimensional. And you can use the spray brush category to kind of smudge them out at the bottom. Like I said, kind of leave the top edges hard and soften the bottom edges. You just kind of want to give a little bit more definition to these clouds that are floating in front of the big giant thunderhead, and that's why it gives it the depth. And here I'm just kind of smudging the darker ones out and sort of working on the shapes of the edges. You want them to look kind of raggedy and wispy, but you don't want to totally blend that out either. And at the bottom of the thunderhead, the clouds are usually darker. This is where you can see the rain falling, or sometimes even hailstones. And here I'm just kind of smoothing those out, but I'm not totally smoothing it out. I'm not making it look real smooth. I'm leaving jagged edges and rounded edges to give the indication of clouds, because clouds are not uniform. They're really jagged looking and wispy, and some places they're rounded, and some places they're jagged, and some places they're really thin. Here I'm using the spray brush to add a little bit of some darker clouds to the wispy clouds that are in front of the big thunderhead. And you can use a dry brush technique to do this if you're following along with your traditional materials. And you just kind of want to give sort of a indication that there's some darker clouds a little bit on the tips of the thunderhead. That just gives it more depth. And here I'm working a little bit more on the edges of the clouds. And I'm adding what everybody calls the silver lining of the cloud. And so these would be your final highlights for the cloud. And you can use pure white for these, because you're not going to add this onto the cloud very much. You're just going to add this onto the edges of the cloud. And when you do that, it really defines the edges of the cloud, and it really makes them pop out against the sky. And you can use your script brush for this if you're following along traditionally. And you can use the Leo brush, an infinite painter, and just make it really small. And that's what I'm doing, just adding a little bit more definition to the lighter clouds, making them look a little bit more rounded on the edges, and following along with my photo reference, just adding those pockets of dark and light there. And here I'm just kind of smudging them in. And again, you would leave the outer edge of the cloud and just kind of smudge on the bottom of your stroke. And that's what gives you the real puffy look that you can get with your clouds there. And I'm just going and sort of smoothing out a little bit near the bottom, and then I wanted to add a little bit more of some lighter pockets right there on the bottom of the cloud, just to give it a little more shape and definition to some of the cloud wisps there. And then you can go back and you kind of smudge in all those wispy looking clouds that are next to the big thunderhead. Add a little bit of some highlight to the dark clouds that are in front of the thunderhead. And that just gives it your three-dimensional look when you add those little bitty scribbles. They're kind of like little bitty scribbles, but you kind of blend out the bottom of the stroke, but leave the top of the edge there. And you just want to go ahead and sort of pick and choose the places that you want to highlight on the cloud. And also follow your photo reference, because it will show you the lightest places that are on the clouds. And here I'm adding some lighter color to the thin wisps next to the Thunderhead. And I just wanted to say that if you want to practice getting your clouds, take your phone camera or any kind of camera, and every time you see a cloud that you think is really neat, just take that picture. And that way you can build up a big library of cloud photo references. And that's what I do. Every time I see a cloud that I think is really neat, I grab my camera and I take a picture so that I have a whole bunch of cloud studies that I can use and add to my pictures. And it just makes your paintings really interesting. You can make a Western painting, and add big clouds into it, or a seascape, just whatever you want to add it to. It just adds more interest to your picture when you have some really neat clouds. And then here I'm just kind of adding the splatters next to the final layer of the mountains here. I just am using hooker's green if you're following along traditionally, and you can use your toothbrush and a thin mixture of water and just splatter that on to give some indications of trees. Like I said, I don't want any big details for that, just some indications of some distant trees on the hills, and that just kind of adds a little bit of depth to the painting and makes it three-dimensional. And here I wanted to add some branches on the sides, like there's a cedar tree, which is what that is. And you can use your Pollock brush if you're following along with Infinite Painter. You can use your bristle brush if you're following along traditionally, and just make a few little blobs for the cedar tree, but we don't want very much. We just kind of want an eye stopper on the edge of the painting to kind of keep the viewer's eye engaged in the main painting. And then I wanted to add just a few branches there just to show indications that it's a tree here. And you can use your script brush for that with a mixture of burnt umber and maybe burnt sienna, just kind of a dark color there, but don't add a lot. Just add a few little branches right there that go along with the cedar tree there, and just use it for an eye stopper. And then you want to go ahead and kind of see what you think of your painting, and if you think it's good, go ahead and sign it, which is what I'm doing here. And this time I'm actually finished with it. And just step back from your painting or shrink it down and look and see what you think about it, and make sure that you save it. And you can make this a little more refined with the clouds if you want to, but don't make it too much more refined, because like I said, you want the clouds to look ragged and you want some of the brush strokes to show, because clouds like this are not uniform. They're not all one color. You want variations and pockets of light and dark, and you want the wispy look, because that makes the clouds look more realistic. So this is the end of my Thunderhead cloud study, and stay tuned for a brand new painting coming soon. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see what that is. I think I'll do another study on some clouds, maybe at sunset or sunrise. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions or you want some suggestions about what you would like to see next, leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.